Okay, so buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the future with Tesla's Optimus robot.
A robot butler, you say?
Well, maybe, eventually. We're going deep on Optimus, cutting through the hype to figure out what this thing can really do.
Which, as always, means looking at what Tesla says it can do and then comparing that with what independent experts are saying.
And we've got a mountain of sources for this one. Tesla announcements, expert opinions, even some of those deep YouTube rabbit holes.
Gotta love those YouTube deep dives, but that's how you get the full picture, right?
Absolutely. So Optimus, for anyone who hasn't been following every twist and turn, this is Tesla's big push to create a humanoid robot, one that can walk and talk and, well, do stuff.
And not just factory stuff, though. That's a big part of it. We're talking about robots in homes, offices, maybe even companions.
Companions. Okay, now you're just messing with me, right?
Hey, I'm just reading the tea leaves here. But in all seriousness, what makes Optimus different from, say, a Roomba is that it's not just a robot. It's basically Tesla's self-driving AI in a human-like form.
So instead of just recognizing a stop sign, this AI is, processing an entire room, identifying every object, predicting what you're going to do next.
That's the theory they're working with, yeah. And remember those videos of Optimus sorting batteries at a Tesla factory? Not exactly science fiction, but it's a real-world application.
Right. From those kind of janky dancing prototypes to actual factory work, Tesla's progress has been kind of amazing.
They went from unveiling this idea back in, 2021, to a working prototype in just a year. Now, a couple years later, their Gen 2 bot is already doing tasks. I even saw one article that said they're aiming for limited factory use as early as next year.
Wow, that's way faster than a lot of people predicted. But are we really saying a robot could learn to, navigate our world just like a Tesla navigates traffic?
That's the idea, and there have been hints of it. But it's a long way from sorting batteries in a controlled environment to, making dinner or folding laundry.
Okay, good, because I was about to say, if this thing can fold laundry, sign me up.
Laundry might be a stretch, at least for now. But it's clear that Tesla's ambitions for Optimus go way beyond just simple tasks.
And we're going to unpack all of that. But before we go full-on robot takeover, let's take a step back. For those of us who aren't, robotics engineers, what's actually going on here? What makes Optimus tick? All right, so under the hood, so to speak. How does this thing actually learn? Because it's not like they're just programming every little movement, right?
Right. This is where traditional robots and Optimus really diverge. You think of, those factory robots. They're programmed for very specific tasks, very repetitive.
Yeah, like welding the same spot on a car chassis over and over.
Exactly. But Optimus, the goal is to have it learn and adapt. In one of the articles I was reading, they made this analogy of, giving a man a fish versus teaching a man to fish.
Okay, I kind of see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So Optimus is learning to fish, but how?
Well, it all comes back to those neural networks we were talking about earlier. And those cameras, tons of them.
Right, so it's processing what it sees, kind of like we do.
Exactly. Recognizing objects, spatial relationships. Theoretically, it could even start to understand human behavior. Like if you usually grab the coffee pot before getting the mug, it would eventually pick up on them.
Hold on a second. So are we saying you could teach Optimus to do something by just, showing it, like a YouTube tutorial, but for robots?
In theory, yes. And the more data it gets, the better it gets. Tesla has even suggested that Optimus could learn from watching videos, which is kind of wild.
Wild is one word for it. Okay, but let's come back down to earth for a second. Even if we're talking, robot butlers making coffee, Elon Musk's vision goes way beyond that. I mean, he's talked about companions, teachers, even caregivers.
Yeah, he definitely likes to aim high, doesn't he? But let's break down those use cases a bit, starting with education. Imagine Optimus as a personalized tutor, available 24/7, could adapt to a kid's learning style, access to a ridiculous amount of information, and maybe best of all, never gets tired of explaining long division.
Okay, as someone who's explained long division a lot, that part does sound pretty good. But what about the social side of learning? Kids need interaction, not just an information dump.
Oh, absolutely. And that brings up the whole design aspect. It's not just how well Optimus functions, it's how approachable it is, how engaging.
Well, some of those early prototypes, they were. How do I put this nicely?
A little rough around the edges. Yeah, I think that's fair. Gen 2 is definitely more polished, sleeker, more human-like, at least in the videos.
Okay, but is it human-like enough? What about that whole uncanny valley thing? Where something's almost human, but not quite, and it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something they're very aware of. Musk keeps saying they want a design that's functional and aesthetically pleasing, but finding that sweet spot, well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Big time. I mean, I'm all for a cool robot helper,
Yeah.
but I don't want to be looking over my shoulder all the time like I'm in some dystopian sci-fi movie.
I hear you. I hear you.
But even if they nail the design, there's still the practical stuff. Like, how long can this thing actually run? What's the battery life like? Because if my robot butler keeps conking out mid-chore, that's not going to be very impressive.
Yeah, good point. Battery life is definitely a big one. I've seen some sources mention estimates around 20 hours on a single charge, which
Yeah,
is honestly pretty good.
20 hours. That's like Olympic-level stamina compared to my phone.
Right. And unlike us humans, robots don't need to sleep, though I guess technically they need to be recharged, so.
Good. You got me there. But your point stands. If it's going to be truly useful, Optimus has to be reliable and as low maintenance as possible.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us to maybe the most sensitive use case and probably the most debated: caregiving.
Yeah, because we're not just talking robot maids at this point. We're talking about something that could potentially assist with, like medication or mobility issues, even just providing companionship to someone who's elderly or maybe has a disability.
And that's where it gets really interesting. I mean, there's so much potential good there. Imagine Optimus helping someone maintain their independence for longer, giving family members peace of mind.
But on the flip side, what if something goes wrong? We're talking about some pretty vulnerable people here.
Yeah.
What if there's a glitch, a malfunction? What then?
Exactly. And these are huge questions. How do you ensure safety? How do you deal with things like potential biases that might be built into the AI? And then there's the whole issue of privacy, someone's every move being tracked, even if it is by a machine.
It's a lot to unpack, and honestly, it feels like we're only just scratching the surface here.
We are. There are so many angles to this.
But before we go full-blown Black Mirror on this thing, let's shift gears for a minute. Because even with all this talk of potential, it's a pretty big question that hangs over everything. Can Tesla actually make this happen? Or is Optimus headed for the scrap heap of overhyped tech dreams? $1 million question, right? Can they actually pull it off?
Well, their track record with, say, electric cars, it's pretty impressive.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
But robots, that feels different, you know?
It is. It is. I mean, there are some serious hurdles between those prototypes we've been watching and like an actual shippable product, one that works, that is.
All right, so hurdles?
Maybe.
Lay it on me. What needs to happen for Optimus to go from like science project to something that's in my house?
Well, for starters, mass production. Building a handful of robots in a lab is one thing. Making millions of them at a price that makes sense. Whole different ball game.
I'm going to guess those robot arms aren't assembling themselves just yet.
Not quite. And then even if they solved the hardware side, you've got the software. That AI is incredibly complex. Can it learn fast enough to handle the real world?
Because let's face it, a drop dish in my kitchen is way more complicated than a misplaced battery in a Tesla factory.
Right. Optimus has got to deal with unpredictable stuff, changing environments, heck, even human error.
And do it all without needing a babysitter. That's asking a lot, even from a super advanced AI.
It is. It is. That level of autonomy, that's what everyone's chasing. The holy grail of robotics, you could say.
You know, you mentioned those videos, the ones Tesla puts out with Optimus doing all those cool tricks.
I've seen them.
There have been, let's say, whispers that maybe, just maybe, some of those videos are enhanced for the benefit of the marketing department.
There's always a bit of, shall we say, creative license with this kind of cutting-edge tech.
Of course, of course. But even if Optimus isn't quite ready to replace my personal assistant tomorrow, it still feels like a big deal. For robotics in general, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Tesla jumping into the ring, it's shaking things up. Suddenly, everyone's got to up their game.
So competition breeds innovation. The classic story.
And that's what's important to remember here. Whether Optimus itself, succeeds or fails, it's already pushing the boundaries.
We're still in the early innings, like you said.
Exactly. Who knows what the game's going to look like in a few years?
Which I guess is a perfect place to leave it. What do you think about all this? Excited? Skeptical? A little bit terrified? Hit us up on social media. Let us know.
This isn't just about robots, is it? It's about what kind of future we're building.
And maybe, just maybe, those robots will be helping us build it right alongside us. All right, that's it for today's deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another wild ride into the world of tech that's changing everything.